You are listening to the Untold Italy Travel Podcast, and this is episode number 53.
Ciao and benvenuti to Untold Italy. I'm Josie.
And I'm Katy, and we're here to help you plan your trip to Italy.
Between us, we have many years of travel experience, and we want to help you uncover your own, as yet untold stories and adventures in Italy.
Each episode, you'll hear practical advice, tips, and ideas to help you plan your own trips to the magical land of history, stunning landscapes, and a whole lot of pasta.
We'll have interviews from experts and focus on local destinations and frequently asked questions about travel in Italy.
Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe to our show.
Now, let's get started on your regular dose of Bella Italia.
Buon anno! Happy New Year, everyone. It's Katy here with a big, warm welcome to 2021 and what is hopefully going to be a very exciting year for us, with our dreams of being in Italy getting ever closer. We have so many fun episodes coming up for you this year. We're going to take you all around Italy, uncovering the places and experiences that you will cherish forever. I can't wait to share some of these dreamy places with you and introduce you to some of my new friends. But on today's episode, we're going to get started on your planning so that you are ready to book that trip you've dreamed about as soon as it is possible, or when you're ready to do so. I know it is winter in the Northern Hemisphere and many of you are stuck indoors. Others of us are on an annual break and looking to do a little mini project. And we recommended getting started on planning your trip to Italy. And not just because we think it's a good thing to do. It was actually revealed in several psychological studies recently, including one by Columbia University, that travellers planning a vacation were reportedly happier than those with no intention of going away. And it seems that the lead up to a trip is what produced feelings of happiness in travellers versus non-travellers. So with time on our hands and the need for something to look forward to, it looks like there's never been a better time to plan a trip. This week I've asked my friend Corinna Cooke, who is the author of the Glam Italia guides and also leads tours in Italy, to come back on the show and share her tips for planning travels in Italy. We're going to walk you through her itinerary building process, step by step, and hope that you pick up a few tips along the way. It's going to be lots and lots of fun. But before we begin, if you're super keen to get started planning your own draft itinerary, then we've also got a special challenge starting in a few days that we'd love you to join. The Italy Itinerary Challenge is a 5-day challenge where you'll create a draft itinerary for your trip to Italy. How it works is we'll send you an email for each of the 5 days of the challenge with small tasks to complete. Most only take about 15 to 20 minutes of your time, although you may find that you want to spend more time on it. It'll walk you through the trip planning process, so at the end of the 5 days, you have a draft itinerary for your travels that takes into account your travel style, interests, must-sees, and logistics. You'll be able to discuss your ideas and get feedback on what you've got planned in the Italy travel planning community on Facebook, or directly from me and other experts in our Untold Italy Insiders group if you're a member. Are you keen to join the challenge? Great! Then head on over to your podcast app where I've left a link to all the information on how to join the challenge in the show notes, or you can go straight to untolditaly.com/itinerary challenge and you can get the information directly from there. The challenge starts on January the 3rd, 2021, so sign up now to be part of all the fun. We can't wait to see what fun itineraries you produce. But right now, let's welcome Corinna back on the show and hear her ideas on how to manage the Italy trip planning process. Ciao, Corinna. Welcome back to the Untold Italy podcast.
Thank you, Katy, and Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Oh, yes, buon anno. We are recording this a little bit before New Year's, but it is buon anno for everyone else, and it's so great to have you here, Corinna. I just love our chats both on and off air, and I know all our listeners appreciate your insight. And I wanted to share with you this comment from our Facebook group, Italy Travel Planning, that happened recently, and it just made me beam from ear to ear. And Donna said, my boyfriend and I have never been to Italy, but it's on our list for a while. I got hooked on your podcast and decided to plan a trip for next summer. The recent podcast on Florence makes me want to spend more time there, and it also inspired us to work on our lists of experiences versus sites. How good is that?
Oh, that makes me so happy.
I know. I thought you might like that.
Oh,
Yeah, it does. I was so happy when I heard that, because Corinna and I both really believe that you need to focus on, what experiences you want to have in your trips to Italy. And so you know what? I was reading recently that there's been some recent research about planning trips, and it said that planning trips and adventures for the future is a huge mood booster. Do you find that's the case?
absolutely. And in my own life, when I went through the toughest time of my life was shortly after I got divorced, and I was working all the time, and I was just scrambling to try and have enough money to get through the week, which is everybody's story. but at that time, my big stress buster was that I would make these pretend trips to Italy, and I would research things and I'd figure it out, and I would imagine what I was going to do. And in those moments when I had to myself, it was what I would do to de-stress. And then all the research I would do to plan out these trips, it was fantastic. And then who knew that I'd end up writing books and actually doing tours and stuff. But it was such a wonderful way to escape. And I think that right now the world's been through so much stress. It's quite nice to be able to just sit there and tinker around and research things and figure out imaginary trips or trips that you may go ahead and do once everything opens back up again.
I know. I've been doing that too, especially this year. It's been so tough, or last year, I should say, 2020. And I've made so many new itineraries to replace the one that got cancelled. But it's really helped me to stay positive and to dream of the future. And, let's hope in 2021 that we can finally get back on the road and get back on the plane and get over to Italy.
I've got a feeling we're going to be able to. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But it makes it a perfect time now to be doing the kind of legwork, the kind of research that, so that once we can travel, you've got it all dialed in and all figured out. And I think that travel will probably have a slightly different look to it. It's also another reason to do some really good planning now.
Yeah, I agree. I think, everyone is kind of itching to go. And so on the one hand, you're going to have quite a lot of competition for, people, flights and all the best accommodation. And also you're probably going to find that people want to change around their, what they were thinking of doing and maybe slow things down a bit. And so, I think it's going to be really interesting. But I do think it's really important to be organised as soon as possible, because in Italy, especially in the peak seasons, even if you're planning out for 22 or 23, it's a really good idea to have things in your mind of what you want to do so you can jump on deals and also get organised and book as soon as you can.
Yes, and I think there's a good chance too that things like the big bus tours and the big cruise events may not be back looking the same way. I have a feeling that people are going to want to do more small group tours or travel, more doing things themselves perhaps. So it's good to have an idea of what some of the things are that you can do and how you would put it together, and maybe venture out on your own a little bit more.
Well, that sounds like fun. Okay. So as we head into 2021, which, as we've said, is bound to be much, much better than 2020, I thought we could give our listeners a bit of an insight into our itinerary planning processes and hopefully give them some more inspiration. Now, because even if you don't travel for a while or even next year or the year after, as we said, it's never too early to start planning. Now, last year, my co-host Josie and I recorded an episode on itinerary planning, but I thought since you write guidebooks for Italy and take tour groups there, that you're bound to have a different perspective. So what do you think? Can we walk our listeners through your itinerary planning process? Where do you start?
So I start with what is the goal with this whole thing. And for me, the goal is to make this the most special experience and the most amazing, fun, fascinating trip of your life. That's the goal going in. And I want to create something that you're going to look back at forever and go, this was incredible. This was my greatest travel moment, or my greatest time of my life was when I did this thing. So that's where I start from, and I work backwards. And I was thinking, for your listener, the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what type of traveler are you. So, and all types of travelers are great. So there's no, there's no stigma or anything. So you might be a frequent traveler who's buzzes around the world and has been to lots of places and feels very confident and comfortable taking off out there on your own. Or maybe you're a first timer and it's like, well, I really want to go see this stuff, but this is a whole new country with a whole new language, and, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. Or perhaps you're someone that has always traveled with a 5-star experience, and you fly first class and you stay in 5-star hotels and you eat at Michelin restaurants. Or maybe you're someone who travels on a budget. And most of my travel as a single mom has been on a super tight budget, a budget so tight it squeaks. But wherever it is that you're at, you kind of want to figure that out first and then design something that's going to work for you. And then you figure out like what type of trip do you want? And a lot of that will impact what time of year you go. So for example, I absolutely love spending my summers on the beaches in Italy. I can never get enough of it. I can never get enough of being on boats and beaches and running around the coast. But if you're not someone that loves being out and about in the heat, then that wouldn't necessarily be the trip for you. Or if you're someone that doesn't care about going to beaches, then you're going to be like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. I want to go and see museums and things, and I want to go and walk the old streets. So you figure out what are the things that really are of most interest to you, and kind of get some of that lined up. Or maybe you want a relaxing trip and you love the idea of staying in a villa in Umbria or Tuscany or somewhere and pottering around and having a relaxing time and just enjoy breathing the Italian air. So when you have an idea of what type of trip you want to do, that helps narrow things down some more as well.
Yeah, it's true. And this, I think that some of the challenge is that there's so many possibilities, but I think when you start planning, you're gathering inspiration as you first start planning, and you're taking in things from lots of different sources, and that helps you form the type of trip that you want, I think. But at some stage, you've got to kind of try and prioritise, I think.
Yeah. And if you have a little bit of an idea going in of what type of trip you want to do, like a more extreme example would be if you're into backpacking and tents and like buzzing around the countryside and pitching a tent and staying in that's a very easy one to go, well, I want to go and do something like that, which, trust me, you'll never catch me doing. But it just helps you kind of figure out like when you want to go and how you want to go and the types of places you want to go to. For example, it gets really, 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 really hot there in July and August. So I don't take any of my tours through in July and August. It's too hot, it's too crowded, too expensive. But were I to be doing a chill out in a villa kind of a deal, I'd be happy to be there right through that whole time. And I know some people will tell me that they really don't enjoy the heat. So I know that for them, walking around sightseeing in like mid-June to say mid-September might be too hot. So they might be better off doing a trip that was, so like April, May, or October, November, that kind of time. So when you can isolate down some of those things, it really helps a whole lot.
I agree. I think that, getting real about what you want compared to what other people may think that you want is a really, I guess, important step in the trip planning process. We, on one of our last trips, can't remember which one, but we met a lovely couple that were on honeymoon, and I said to them, how did you come up with your itinerary for this trip? Because, they were hitting all the high spots and, all the, I guess, really popular places. And they actually said to me that they 100% copied a friend of theirs itinerary. And I thought that was really interesting because I can understand why people would do that, because it's quite, obviously it's easy and they know their friends had a great time. But then I was wondering, well, are they going to have, the most amazing experience that they could have if they're, not fully invested? But you know what? It's up to you. If you want to follow someone's itinerary, then that's amazing. But I think if you want those memories to come through, and those ones that you are going to cherish forever, then it's going to be those moments that you put a little bit of planning into, and then just sit back and relax and let it all wash over you.
Exactly. And what I recommend to people is, at this time when we can't travel, is the perfect time to do the research and do the fun research of doing things like watching movies that are set in Italy, and reading books that are set in Italy, and watching TV shows set in Italy. And one of the things that I think is incredibly powerful is tracking travel bloggers. So I use Pinterest a lot, and it's a really great way to find really good travel bloggers, because they speak in a different voice and they tell a different kind of experience. Your regular travel books and everything are going to hit all those hotspots and just send you straight into the storm where all the tour bus people are going, and it's just hitting those same not homogenized things, but it's just taking you to that same thing. Whereas travel bloggers do so many interesting bits and pieces. I constantly find fascinating things because of travel bloggers. One, for example, was I was going to Barcelona, and I thought, well, what are some really unusual things to do in Barcelona? What are some other things that I might not already know about? And through going on Pinterest and typing in unusual things to do in Barcelona, what are some other things to do in Barcelona, kind of thing, I found these bloggers who went to this town called Girona, which is only it's 40 minutes by train, and it looks just like Tuscany, which is right up my alley. And this little town I'd never even heard of before. They're like, here are 10 things to do there. So of course I went and I did all of them, but it was just really fun, and it was something that I wouldn't have known about had I not explored that realm. So I think it's a really good thing to do. And then listening to podcasts like yours. I mean, I take notes when I'm listening to your podcast. Things I want to do because of what I've heard on here. And actually, I'll tell you another funny story. Today, I was thinking about Turin. And when I was thinking about this, I was like, oh, okay. So if I wanted to find things to do in Turin, what are some travel bloggers saying? And I actually, and your readers can do this, I Googled travel bloggers Turin, and in the list up comes Untold Morsels. And I'm like, what's this? And I click on it, and there's your smiling face.
Well, I was going to say, far be it from me to just promote travel bloggers all the time, but as a travel blogger myself, that's how I started out. That's really, was my passion. And so I know a lot of other travel bloggers that put so much time and effort into producing amazing content that you can find on the web. And I think I hope to raise up as many of those people as possible by inviting them on the podcast as well, so we can talk about them. And a lady appeared earlier last year, Laurie Sorrentino, and she spent a lot of time in Italy exploring Emilia-Romagna in particular, and so that was amazing to have her on the show. But I agree, I love Pinterest. It really is I think it's a bit like a mood board almost, and people use it a lot for lots of different things. But yeah, it's definitely got heaps of travel content on there. So if you haven't used that, you should really give it a go.
Yeah. And if you're at that space where you're thinking, well, I don't know where I want to go. And, which I think a lot of people, when they start out, it's like, whoa, here's a map and there's this great big country, and how am I supposed to figure out where to go? Pinterest can be a great resource, just typing in things to do in Italy and things to do in this part of Italy and that part of Italy. And you start getting these great visuals, obviously, because it's a visual medium, but it helps you to find these great travel bloggers. And, you can read through some fantastic things and be like, yeah, but that's not quite what I want to do on this trip. And that was interesting to know about, but I don't want to do that. But, oh, look at this one. I have to do this. This has to go on the must-do list. And I think it's really incredibly helpful. And it's real people not doing corporate speak at you. They're not saying eat at Shade, Mario, it's dollars. You actually get really good information about this town is 30 minutes away by train from Florence, and you can take this train and it goes straight there. And when you get there, cross the street and there's this ice cream shop. And it just like, they just give you really, I find, really manageable information for real people.
Yeah, I think it's great. I also use Instagram for inspiration too. And I know Paola, who appeared on an episode last year about Puglia, she was saying that she uses Instagram, and not even just travel Instagrammers, but people that may have maybe lived there or, have got some different perspective, like there might be a chef or something like that. And I think Instagram is a great way to get some inspiration, especially pretty places. But you have to be a bit careful because sometimes the images have been a bit, I guess, improved.
But you can see something like a town that you haven't heard of before. And then you click on that on the location finder, and suddenly up comes a whole page of all kinds of different people that have posted there. And you can find fascinating things as well as what to eat there, because it's such a regional cuisine. So it's great to know, oh, gosh, I didn't know you're supposed to order this thing there. How cool was that? And then that goes on your list of things you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's that sandwich place in Florence it's kind of became an Instagram star.
It is the best sandwich of my entire life, and I eat there like every time I'm in Florence.
But they just did it. I think, some people did some amazing posts on Instagram and it's just gone viral, so that there's big queues there now, I think.
Oh, yeah, they're right. Well, they've now opened 3. So when I first went, there was 1. And then I went racing back the next year when I was there, and there was 1, the original 1 and 1 across the road. And now there's another one up the street as well. They've got 3 of them, and it's cranking the whole time. And you do have lots of travelers now who know about it, but there's always this long line of locals who, this is where they come. And all the sandwiches, they were €5, they're now €6. And so you get the giant sandwich. It's the best sandwich you've ever had in your life. And for like another €4, you can get this like tankard of red wine. It's just so great.
I love it. But it's not just online resources that are helpful. Even though, I have online resources, I always look to books because, when you're writing a book, and Corinna, you know this very well yourself, there's a lot of effort and research and fact checking that goes into making a book, because to get a publishing deal you need to be producing something extremely high quality. So I always look at guidebooks as a starting point, because you can get some good ideas of itineraries and a little bit deeper dive into some of the, I guess, the regions, if you want to know from a historical perspective. And so I always usually get the Lonely Planet. That's been a thing as a starting point. And when I discovered Corinna's books, I was off for lots of juicy details of quirky, things to do, and just, the passion that comes out instead of maybe a more dry, factual kind of book.
Yeah. Well, another great resource with books is there's all these people who've gone over there and, bought a house and done it up and done that whole thing. And they're always full of great tidbits when you look and you read in between the lines and you read all the bits and pieces. So for me, I want to say it was 1998 when Under the Tuscan Sun came out. And my mom bought me that book. And up until that point, Peter Mayle's Year in Provence was my favorite book. And then she gives me this one, and it absolutely changed my world. And I was thinking about it, that I want to say it's 1998, but I might be wrong on that. But then, who had heard of Cortona? Who even knew about Cortona? Nobody. Italians, Tuscans did, but it was just a little town on a hill in a part of Tuscany. And then Frances Mays, with her stories, made everybody fall in love with it. But I know which places to go to there, and I know where to go and sit and have, I'll actually write down what she has for lunch and what place, and I'll go there and I'll do the same thing. But, and I've read all of her books, and I get so much great information about little towns I wouldn't otherwise know, which place to look for to go have lunch. And it's wonderful. And then there's so many of those books, which are just they're so pleasurable to read. People who've gone and done this interesting thing that I dream about doing, but in reality, I'm never going to do. I'm not going to go buy an old house and do it up. Like, I'd be terrible at that. But I love reading about other people doing it. And through them, you can find fantastic wineries and fantastic things to go and look at, and statues and artwork and interesting old villas with great stories. And it just makes things wonderful. Like, another good example is there was this book written by a lawyer who his wife got a year's sabbatical to go to Italy to work on her painting. And so he took the year off, and he was just going to sit in the piazza and write a book. And it's one of the funniest books I've ever read. It's called Pasquale's Nose. And they went to this little town called Sutri. And Sutri's claim to fame is it's where Pontius Pilate was born. But that's about it. But this town is fantastic. And I read the book and fell so in love with the book that I had to go to the town. And then it was this whole rigmarole trying to find somewhere to stay, because I don't really get tourists there. But the more devoted to it I was, the more I was like not going to let it go. But we went there and had a holiday there, and it was incredible. And it's one of those things I would never have known about it had I not read that book. And then because they don't get a lot of tourists there, everyone was very interested. And it got out that, somebody had said to me, how did you know about Sutri? And I said, I read Michael Ripp's book. And that got translated somehow into I was Michael's friend. And everyone was like, oh, his friend. I said, no, I read the book. I don't know him. But they were taking him, like, this is where he sat in his chair. And then all the people were coming out and meeting us and doing all these fun things. And it was such a tremendous part of our holiday or our vacation that we would have completely missed had we not read that book. So there's a lot of great little bits and pieces you can find that pad out parts of your trip by reading books and watching movies and doing things like that.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that, because a friend of mine gave me a wonderful book by a guy called Anthony Doerr, and he's he's got a book called 4 Seasons in Rome. And my friend gave it to me because he moved to Rome with baby twins, and I'm a mum of twins, so she thought, she knew how much I love Italy, so she gave it to me. So I'm reading it now, and it's just like, yeah, you're so right. And it's just like, for me, it just talks to me on many, many different levels, because my life experience is fairly similar. We moved overseas with young twins, and but he moved to Rome, which I thought, wow, and to an apartment that had no elevator.
Yes, and it's just right up the hill from where I stay. So he's in Trastevere, but up on the hill, up at the Janiculum. And so every single place he talks about in that book, I know exactly where he's talking about. And then it's so fun to go when you've read a book, or especially because you almost feel like you're joining the experience with him. So when you then go and walk those streets, you'll be looking for the things that he's talked about. And when you go see them and you go do these different things, it's so exciting, and it just gives another whole level of resonance to your trip.
Oh, it really does. And it's the same with books, movies, TV shows. Like, there's so many of them out there that you can get inspiration from. Even someone's into Roman history, go watch Gladiator and see that, get that excitement and for going to the Colosseum,
Absolutely. And, I think for someone who's like a first-timer, or who's planning a trip for the first time, because it's quite different than jumping on a bus tour where they've got everything lined up for you. And I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, how do I figure out where I want to go? And, so maybe going out to Cortona on your own might be a little bit of a handful. But it's great to start off with looking at the big cities and seeing, which of the big cities would really interest you. And then from there, you can figure out small places to sidestep off to, because the big cities are very easy to get to from one another. And the train system is so amazing that I think with Italy, perhaps more so than most other countries, you can really get around and you can really plan a tremendous trip quite easily. So, I think a lot of people want to see, for example, Venice and Florence and Rome, and maybe go down to the Amalfi Coast. That's actually quite doable. It's not hard to put that together. And then you might say, well, I also want to see some of Tuscany. Well, that's easy to do, figure out from Florence. But it's just great the way it can be so opened up to you and so easy to get around.
That's very true. So, yeah, you do have those trains, but there's a couple of practical things that I always like to tell people when they're planning their own trips. And because it does look so easy when you go, oh, it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours between Rome and Florence. Yes, that's the bit that's on the train, but you've got to build in some transit time to get, to the station, organise, get orientated at either end, and then, make your way to and from your accommodation. So it is a fast train, no doubt, but you are probably going to eat into half a day of your vacation with travel for doing that, just to get from A to B. I think that's a really important thing to note because, I see a lot of people trying to, do this, Rome, Florence, Venice and Amalfi Coast in 10 days. And it's, that is a fast trip.
That's a lot. That is a lot. I have a rule that I try and stick to where you stay a minimum of 3 nights in any place. And I try and not move more than 3 times because it does take up so much holiday time, vacation time, with the checking out of one place, the getting to the train station or getting to whatever, the getting to the new town, getting checked in. You've lost the biggest chunk of the day. So the less you're doing that, the better. And if someone's a first timer or new to setting up travel for themselves, it can be good, for example, to plan on having a few days in Florence and do some day trips from there by train. For example, going to Lucca, that's really easy. You just, if you're based in Florence, you can just buzz out to Lucca for a day, buzz out to Arezzo for a day. There's lots of things you can do from there. So you're not having to pack your bags and move. You can just stay in that one home base.
Yeah, I agree. So much, easier to do it that way. And in fact, when I did my trip last year, and I'm very experienced in Italy, so I know, what to do, but I would still to this day prefer to do that because you can come back, relax, unpack, have your shower. You don't have to worry about whether you're going on to the next day, because the reality is that I don't know too many people that have been to Italy just once, actually.
Exactly.
Once you've got a little bit of a taste, you're always kind of wanting to go back. And so I think, it's as tempting as it is to try and do it all, you can't. You actually can't. Even in a lifetime, you can't do it all. So, just try and resist the temptation to travel every 2 days because it is exhausting, actually. And I think there's a few extra steps that you may not anticipate. Just understanding the culture and how things work and making sure that you get from A to B. And you know what? You'll make mistakes. We've got a whole episode on some of the mistakes we've made.
Everything I know from doing it the hard way. I made every mistake in the book, which is, it doesn't matter for me because I was just swanning around doing, nothing overly important anyway. But when you're saving up for your trip and you've got 10 days, 2 weeks, it's like the average spell, then I think it's really important to figure that stuff out and to cut back, to not do as many things as you're originally thinking. Mm-hmm. So I'd say start off, make this big list. Like look at all these different cities, look at the different small things that you'd like to do. Maybe your idea of a great trip is to just go tool around Tuscany for a couple of weeks. I've done that. That's been fantastic. But I wouldn't plan on doing too many things. So, but you start off making a huge list of all these great things to do, all the great cities you want to see, the great towns you want to visit, do the research, read the blogs, read the books, listen to the podcasts, watch the movies, and get all this big amount of information. And then we start mapping it out. Going, okay, where is this on the map? And there'll be some things that you have to chop off. Like people will often say to me, well, I want to see Florence and I want to see Rome and I want to see Sicily and I want to see, and I'm like, whoa. Back it on down. I always say Sicily is its own trip. Like pad it with maybe Rome at the beginning and the end, but just Sicily. Don't do anything else. And, I love Matera. I love it like crazy. But as much as I would love to throw Matera in on every trip, it's basically a day to get there. And it's quite involved. So I'll only do that on a trip where I really can afford that time. And it's not everything is doable. So if you get a list and start refining down, well, some people will be like, well, I don't care about, say, Venice. I don't need to see that, but I really want to see the Colosseum and I really want to see where the gladiators were. So maybe put Venice onto your next trip. Or like Turin's one that gets me, because I'm always trying to figure out getting Turin into a trip, and I'm always trying to figure out getting Urbino into a trip. And they're both tricky and time consuming to get to. So when you look at it, well, the reality is that will take me, 5 hours door to door. That's the best part of a day gone. So that isn't necessarily right for this trip. It's right for another trip when it can not be so hurried.
I know. I love Torino. Well, I love to go there. And in fact, we've got an episode coming up just on the area, actually. So just to tempt you. But it's true that the rule of three, the 3 days in the spot, is really, I think, and I am the one that likes to break the rules. And I'm always pushing it with this one, but it makes such a big difference to have those 3 days as a base and not to move around. And, you'll get to know the places. You'll have your favourite coffee shop or your gelato place that you want to go and try. And I think it's really, really good just to pick a spot and sit for a little while and get out the map. Like, this is what I do. Once I've got all my inspiration pieces and I've got a list of places, that's like 20 places long that I want to go and see, I get Google Maps and I start putting the places in, and then you can use the directions function very easily to see how long the train journeys are. Just make sure you put in the right times, because if you put it in at midnight in Australia, sometimes it's like, oh, it's midnight, there's no trains. I'm like, what? There's no trains? What's going on? But then I realise that I've put in the wrong time. But, then you can put in pins of where you want to go and then start mapping it. I actually keep heaps of my ideas on Google Maps. So then if I want to go somewhere, I just zoom in and it's all there. And you should see my map of Italy. It's hilarious. It looks like it's yellow with all these pins on it. It's crazy.
And then also, like, if there's places that you really, really want to go and see, another thing is to look at what are the different ways of getting there. So, for example, from Florence to Siena, it's kind of like 2 trains. It's a little bit of a hop, skip, and a jump to get there on the train. But there's actually, you can get the bus, and these buses are really nice. They're like the big luxury coaches, and they cost nothing. And you can get the bus from Florence to Siena like in half the time it takes the train. And so that's like a cool, and you're driving through Tuscany. It's all beautiful. So there's different things, little tricks you can do with that as well. So don't just stop at your first option with how you're getting somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good one about Siena, because as well with the train, you still have to somehow find your way into town from the train station in Siena, whereas the bus drops you right inside.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's little tricks like that. And then also we start getting this list of where we want to go. And then we want to look at, well, how are we going to get around? And this is another big thing. So I like driving around the place, but my first experiences of driving were quite well, actually, my first driving over there, I went with my best friend, and she's fearless and she's driven all over Europe. And, it never occurred to me that I'd actually have to get behind the wheel. But when I did, it was fine, because it was always one of us riding shotgun and doing the directions, and everything was hilarious and fun. And then we did it again the following year, but she left earlier than me. And I was like, well, I'm good at driving in Italy. This is great. And I was staying on in San Gimignano, and I dropped her at the airport. And from that moment on, everything just went so horrendously wrong. It was a nightmare. And at one point, I was going into the toll area when you get off the motorway. And I got on the wrong line. I was in the Tally-Pass line. And of course I didn't have a Tally-Pass. And all the cars were backing up behind me. And I'm like going hot and cold and like having palpitations and everyone's honking horns and I didn't know what to do. And then finally this guy came up on a motorcycle and used his pass to open the gates so I could get through. But I think about things like that, and I did survive it, but it was so traumatic. Like that whole day was still trauma. And I think, if that was your first trip, that would be devastating. So you only want to plan driving if you're comfortable driving in foreign countries. And if you're not, maybe don't make it your first trip that you do that. So then you look at things and go, okay, well, now I have this list of places that I want to go to, but these ones I'm going to take out because I need to be driving, and that's them maybe a little bit hairy. And these ones I can keep in because I can get there by train. And, so maybe you want to have, I use Tuscany a lot because most people can relate to Tuscany, whereas if I'm talking about Piemonte or something, they're like, what's she talking about now? Say your dream is that you want to have a Tuscan experience where you're not in a big city. You could look at that as, well, which little Tuscan towns are on a train line that I can buzz into Florence and I can buzz to some different places from. And then you'll find all kinds of wonderful little places so you can change up your experience so it's not just staying in the cities. And that can be really cool too.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And there's so many great places that are on train lines. One of my favourites is Orvieto, actually, which is really easy to get to between Rome and Florence. So you can easily, it's literally on the train line between Rome and Florence. So you can jump off and spend a few days there and enjoy that completely different experience of this hilltop. It's a small city, but it's so different to, those other two places. So you can have this excellent experience. So it really comes down to what you want out of your trip and then how, just to be aware of some of the practical things, because like you said, with the car, if you are thinking about getting a car, please do some research on it, because not just the motorway or the autostrada issues that you can have but there's also historical zones where you're not allowed to drive. And, we have in our group, we have lots of people who are getting fines, 1 to 2 years later, that have inadvertently gone into these areas. And it's very easy to do. And it's not to say that you shouldn't get a car, because, we love driving in Italy. But again, we have a lot of experience, and, we have wounds, battle scars for when things have gone wrong. And I'm, getting stuck between two stone walls. That was an exciting highlight of mine. But it can be done. But the train is so easy. So if you can make a train.
Depends on what your stress threshold is. Like for me, if it were my first time going over there and I had planned driving trip, that would be really stressful for me. I'm fine driving now because I've been so many times. And also when I started driving over there, I was with my best buddy who was fearless. So that changed things up. But then there's this couple that I actually met on my very first trip when I did my Kentucky tour. And I was 21, and I don't know how old they were, but we got together again last year in Florence, which was really fun. We've always stayed friends all these millions of years, but they travel everywhere. Like they really get out there in the world and travel. And Graham drives everywhere. He loves it. It doesn't bother him. He, was last year he was driving in Oman, and he was driving in Morocco, and all these places that I would find completely overwhelming. But to him, it's just fun. He doesn't get bothered by it at all. So it depends on who you are. There's plenty of people who aren't fazed even slightly by driving in a different country. But I just think, figure out who you are. If it's going to be stressful to you, don't do it. If it's not going to be stressful to you, do it. It's all good fun. But really just understanding, like when you're planning a trip, what's going to make this the greatest thing for you? What's going to make this the most amazing trip ever? Not just a good trip, but the best one ever.
Exactly. And to that point, like if one of the things you desperately want to do is see the Uffizi Gallery or some of the museums in Florence, you absolutely must do this, because mistakes have been made by this person, by myself. You cannot see them on a Monday. The museums are closed on a Monday in Florence. So you need to be aware of that. It's a really important thing, because you literally cannot go inside those museums on those days. So even understanding the timing. So, of course, the churches and the Vatican are closed on a Sunday morning for the Mass. And, if you really want to go and, look inside these churches, you obviously need to find a time in your day that's, not not those times. Otherwise, you are going to be disappointed. So, having these dreams and then checking it off against practicalities is one of the most important things you can do. So you make sure that your dream comes true.
Museums, or the most popular ones like the Academia and the Uffizi, you need to book a ticket online ahead of time because those lines can be hours and hours waiting in line. So you want to have pre-booked tickets. And I know that this year they've been doing it all as timed slots. In fact, the last couple of years, Uffizi, it's been a timed entrance. So you book your ticket ahead online and you're at 9:00 on Tuesday morning. And that's when you go in.
Yeah.
For the big, super popular museums that get very overcrowded, my advice is get the first slot, the earliest slot you can get in there, because they get really backed up with lots and lots and lots of people. So when you get that really early slot, first one's in, it's great.
Absolutely. Well, itineraries, we've got them, we've checked, we've got our inspiration, we've worked out the type of trip that we want, and then we've checked it off. And so I think that gives us a really good framework. You can probably have at that point, your 10 days or your 2 weeks mapped out. You can, if you've checked the timing differences of, the travel times, you've checked what's going on in the city, you've understood that, whether you want to get a car or a train, at that point, you've got a really good rough itinerary. I think you can have that.
Yeah. So then the next thing I would do is, of course, I make that list of experiences that you want to have, and that's the most important one. Mm-hmm. But then also the list of things to do. And I always, for myself and for my tours, always will have, if I'm going to have 10 things happen in a day, I'll have a list of 50, 20 to 50, mm-hmm. because there's always going to be more things than you can possibly do. Every place in Italy is going to have more amazing things to see and do than you can possibly do. And the more you start delving in and making these big, long lists, the more things you're going to find that would actually really be of great interest to you personally. And, maybe those big blockbuster things that the tour buses go to, those might not be your things. And also, I think you have to have a plan B. So, like, for example, with my tour groups, I might be taking them to plan A as I'm taking them here, and I get there and there's a huge long line or there's a whatever. I'm going to divert off around the corner and take them to plan B. But things happen. So you might have your day in, whatever town you're going to mapped out, and you're going to do this and this and this and this, and you get to this museum or this thing that you wanted to go to, and it's closed. And maybe the guy's wife went to hospital and he closed it. Or maybe there's some festa you didn't know about happening that day and it's closed. If you've only got these set things on your list, then you're kind of stuck. But if you've got this list of 20 things that you can do in Orvieto, you go to that one that you desperately wanted to and it's closed, no problem, because I got all these other things to do, and off you go. And I have this travel philosophy that if plan A doesn't work, plan B is invariably 1,000 times better anyway.
I love it. I can just see, my younger, less experienced self standing with the phone going, where can we go now? Googling this on the spot. And let me tell you, that's a little bit frustrating when you realise.
And if you've pre-planned all these things that you'd like to go and see, you just flip it and go to something else, and it hasn't destroyed your day in Rome, or it hasn't destroyed your day in Florence, and you're not standing there panicking and not knowing what to do. Instead, you're like, all right, I'm going to do this instead.
Golden.
I think having that, being mentally flexible is huge when you're traveling, and just allowing things to just flitter off and be like, all right, that didn't work, so I'm going to do this instead. And I have endless stories of either plan A hasn't worked out and plan B has been astoundingly, brilliantly fantastic, and I couldn't have possibly imagined how great that experience was going to be. So,
absolutely. Oh, that sounds amazing. Oh. So, Corinna, I don't know about you, but like I think I mentioned at the start of the show, I have actually thought of a few itineraries when I've over the past few months as we've stayed resting in place. Have you managed to pull any together yourself?
Oh, all the time. I do all the time. It's like one of my hobbies, is like figuring out all these interesting things to do. And, so there's always, with Italy, it just doesn't stop. So I think some countries, there's kind of a finite number of things you're going to do and then it's over. But with Italy, it just keeps on going and going and going and going. But I have lots of, like, I'm obsessed with Urbino at the moment and trying to get there. I always have more things I want to do in Puglia and Sicily. Don't even get me started. Like when you put out that list the other day, it was fantastic with all the things to do in Sicily. And like there's a lot of them that I have done. There was others that I haven't done. And like you talked about Mazzara al Valle, and that's one that I've had on my list for eons that I haven't been to.
Wow.
But just always so many more things to see and do. So it's always great. And actually these things that we've talked about today, they're how I personally figure out trips that I'm doing. And when I'm heading off into some part of Italy that I haven't been to before, this is how I put it together. I read the books, I watch the movies, I Google things, I find the travel bloggers, I listen to the podcasts, and I take endless notes and figure out, well, that's really cool, but I really don't want to go do that. But this, on the other hand, is something that is on my cannot miss list, and figure it all out from there. And then I also make lists of what the wines are that you drink when you go to that place and what the foods are that you must eat when you go to that place. And
do you use a particular tool to keep all your notes in, or do you just do it on a notebook, or how do you keep all your lists?
Well, I have Pinterest boards that I'll make Pinterest boards for different places that I'm interested in, and I keep things there. But on my phone, I have, like, you just see my notes, for example, for like Rome. I know Rome like the back of my hand, and I only ever am adding more things. That list never gets any shorter. And whenever I've spent a lot of time in Rome, and I'm always crossing things off and going and seeing all these interesting things that I've put on my list, but the list only ever gets longer. But yeah, I have lists for every city you can think of. And I really do take notes. So I take notes when I listen to your podcast. I take notes when I'm reading books, and it's all, it all makes it more fun, I think.
Oh, yeah, totally. I like to use Evernote too because you can search in your notes, and Google Docs. I need to refine my process a bit because I've got notes all over the place. It's crazy. I just wanted to tell you about one little trip that I've dreamed up in the past few months that I just really want to do. And that's one because for some reason the lakes really call me. Like, we don't have that in Australia, and so these big lakes, and I know lots of people have them in the US and in Europe, but we really don't have big lakes in Australia, and so I've always found them really fascinating, and I love Prosecco. So this dream trip that I've got, it takes me to two cities that I love, and it takes me to the lakes, and it also takes me to Prosecco country. So I was like, win, 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 win. So my dream would be to, explore the Prosecco makers and relax by the lake with the mountains in the background, and then go eat some cicchetti in Venice and find some new hot to trot cicchetti places. So I just have this, I've mapped out a lovely 2-week trip that takes in all of that, and I've got it ready to go.
That's wonderful. So I had some friends who live in Varese, which is outside of Milan, and they took me to Lake Maggiore, and we just did a day of like tooling around, and she was showing me where she used to work and where she used to live and where she used to have an apartment, and it was one of the greatest days ever. And at the time I was like, my gosh, I've got to, like, there's another thing I've got to do. I've got to like add in some more lake strips because they're fantastic. There's so many great things to see and do.
I know. I've got another one that's that I did, which is I just feel like I've got unfinished business with Naples, like really such unfinished business. So I need to go back down there, and then I need to go to Capri because Holly, if you haven't listened to our friend Holly Starr's episode on Capri, and yeah, it sounds amazing.
So if you haven't listened to it, you absolutely must listen to it. Hearing her story of how she arrived there and how she met her husband, it's just, it's everything. Thing.
Yeah. And now they have a garden above the Blue Grotto, which I must see with my own eyes. Absolutely must.
I stalk her on Instagram.
I love it. And I love to go back to Praiano and just like hang out and just enjoy the Amalfi Coast for being the Amalfi Coast rather than, you know, like going and seeing things and just, you know, going for swims in the sea and yeah.
Been to the island of Procida?
No, that's on my list too. Yeah.
Magnificent. It's so great. I mean, that was another one that was, you know, from doing all this stuff, that's how I found Procida, and it got onto one of my lists, and then I was able to get to go there. And for your listeners, Procida is an island off of Naples, and it's in the chain where you have Capri and Ischia, Procida. And it's one of the 10 most colorful places in the world. And so as you're coming in, it's a little bit, so most people are familiar with pictures of Burano and how brightly colored the houses are there. This is like Burano on acid. It's just like your brain doesn't know quite how to process this incredible island. It's visually so astounding. And it's teeny, teeny, tiny. So you can go and like meander around for a day and be really good. And if you watch the movie Il Postino, most of it was actually shot on the island of Procida, on the backside of it. And you can go there and sit and like have lunch, and it's wonderful.
That's on my and Ischia, obviously. Yeah. Have not been there either yet. See that there's so many places and so many things to do. Even after I think I've, you know, well over 30 trips that I've been there, I've still got so many places to go and see. So it's actually not possible to see Italy in one trip, unfortunately, unless that's a lifetime.
Unless it's a lifetime trip, and even then you're not going to get to see it all. But I do think another good rule of thumb when you're planning a trip is that even if you're only going to be in the big cities, regardless of where you're going to be, plan on spending 25% of your time doing the big ticket things, like the big tourist attractions, and 75% of your time doing the other stuff. So you don't need to be where the crowds are all the time. And when you have that 25-75 game plan in mind, it's going to make you look outside the box a little bit, and you'll find all these amazing things to do that are just going to take your trip to the next level. And that's what we want to do. We don't want to have just another trip. We want to create the greatest trip of all time that you're going to remember for forever and ever and ever and ever, and say, this was the greatest thing I ever did. So just doing like little things like that really, really, really helps.
Yeah, I think so, because if you are interested in Roman history, well, yes, sure, you must see the Colosseum. Of course, you've got to go see the Colosseum. It's amazing, but wow, are there so many other Roman sites in Rome and around Italy that you can go and immerse yourself in? And like, I've got lists of them, you know.
And I follow all these people on Instagram who they do things like they go around and look at all the spoiler, which is all the leftover bits and pieces from ancient Rome that are incorporated into other buildings now. And then they'll tell you little stories about things, and you see some random column that's built into, like, another building's been built around it, and they'll be like, this is from Hadrian, and it was, you know, part of this thing he built. And it's fascinating. So you can find all these interesting things like that just elevate your trip to the next level. Because yes, you've been to the Colosseum and you've done a tour of that and you've done the Palatine Hill and everything, but then when you're going off and finding all these other random bits and pieces, it's really, really interesting. And there's never been a time like now for planning travel. There's never been so much information, and so much information that's not just the corporate information, where it's real people telling real stories, and whatever it is that you're interested in, you can find people that's their interest, and they've got all the information there. So maybe you're interested in doing foodie tours or walking aperitivo tours, like sign me up. Or like I have friends in the motor racing world, and they go to Pagani and to Ferrari, and they go and they do all these things that, you know, I'm not really interested in doing. I'm not going to go do it. But to them, it's the greatest thing ever. And I think it's just so good that you can, at this time, we can find all this great information that wasn't available to me in the 90s when I was traveling and wasn't available to me in the early 2000s when I was traveling. So there's never been a time like now for planning the most killer trip on the planet.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Oh, Corinna, even just simply talking to you about planning trips is making me smile, and I can feel those endorphins rushing through my body. So good. Now, listeners, if you want to stay in touch with Corinna and know exactly when her new books and tours are released, she's going to tell you exactly how to do that right now.
Yeah, well, the best one-stop shop is my website, which is corinnacooke.com. So that's CORINNACOOKE.com. And that's like a good central place. My Instagram is Corinna Travels. My blog is Corinna B's World. The blog is just all, like it's really just now all Italy travel tips and interesting bits and pieces that I find. And then Pinterest is Corinna Makeup from the old days when I still am a makeup artist, but that's the old name, but it's now just all travel content. And from there you can bounce off and find all kinds of interesting things.
Oh, wonderful. Now, Corinna, grazie. One trip I didn't share with you is the one that I'm dreaming of. It's the one where I catch up with you, Josie, and all the other friends I've met thanks to this podcast. It will definitely involve lots of long lunches, toasting each other, and looking forward to the future. Thanks so much for joining us again on Untold Italy.
Thank you for having me. Ciao, tutti.
Gosh, isn't Corinna smart? And you know what? I learned quite a few golden nuggets of information from her today that I wasn't expecting. And one of my favourite tips that she mentioned is to make a plan B, and I have actually learned that the hard way. But her suggestion to also make a plan C is really great too. You know what? If you don't need to use it at the time, then it's always in reserve for a future trip. Brava, Corinna. It's so great to have her on the show. As I mentioned at the start of this episode, we are running the Italy Itinerary Challenge starting on January the 3rd. You can sign up to join in by heading to your podcast app where I've put a link to the details in the show notes. We can't wait to see you all there happily planning trips and getting ready for a bright and hopeful year ahead. That's all for this week. We hope you enjoyed this planning episode of Untold Italy. Grazie. Thanks as always for listening. And if you've enjoyed the show, do leave us a rating or review. We've had so many lovely comments recently that brought a smile to our faces, and I'll read out some next week. But for now, it's ciao.